Hello, online fam! Our last video of the week. Hope you guys have been doing well. So, to recap, we have talked about many different things. Let's go to our modules. We've talked about Dr. Martin Luther King. We've taught someone about Martin Luther King. We've discussed Malcolm X. And we've matched who said it based on what we know about the two gentlemen and based on what we know about their beliefs. Who do you think would be most likely saying these things? Um, Civil rights today is something that you worked on yesterday or at your own pace. What are some civil rights issues that you think need to be addressed today? I'm very interested to see you guys answering this question because, as we've talked many times in my class, we know that equality isn't just all of a sudden obtained. We know that it's not waving a magic wand and all of a sudden everyone's equal. So I'm very interested as from the perspective of today's youth, as teenagers who are turning into and growing into young men and women, or like my mom always would say, "Oh, you're such a nice young man. Soon you'll be a young adult." I'm very interested to hear and to see some of the perspectives that you guys have to offer because we all have differences of opinions and we all have different ways of looking at things. And one thing I've noticed is it's very easy for someone who's much older than someone else to view something very differently. For instance, my grandfather and I, we have differences in opinions when it comes to a lot of things. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. So make sure that this Civil Rights Today one is one that you guys are doing. And then finally, our last module for the video, that is for day 4, is our Freedom Rider activity. So go ahead and take a watch. This video is pretty lit, if I may say so. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. Our last day or our last video is all about the Freedom Riders. Well, I want to go ahead and have you guys take a 30-second watch onto this trailer. It's a American Experience. It's a PBS produced film series about the Freedom Riders, and it's very critically acclaimed. So take a look.
The critics call it superb, remarkable, a stunning accomplishment. Just sit on the front of a bus. People could try to burn you to death. Powerful, inspiring, about as essential as you gets.
We're willing to accept that.
Winner of 3 Primetime Emmys, Freedom Riders.
Your parents tell you, don't start something that you can't finish. Finish it.
On American Experience.
So I know that the quality of the audio probably wasn't what it needed to be, but what you saw there were lots of black and white men and women who were riding on a bus. And we'll give you some more specifics here. The Freedom Riders, the first Freedom Ride took place on May 4th, 1961. 7 African Americans and 6 whites were members of the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, which we mentioned yesterday. They left Washington, D.C. on 2 public buses. The reason they did this was they wanted to see, right? They planned on riding the buses into the Deep South to test the Supreme Court ruling that segregation on interstate buses was illegal. So this Morgan versus Virginia case ruling from right after World War II, they wanted to test and make sure that people were following this rule. And it goes to, it serves, or it's worth mentioning that a lot of the ball started rolling and the idea started coming to the forefront of more equal treatment of the black community after they did an amazing job fighting with their Caucasian brothers, with their Latino brothers on the battlefront in World War II. There were some segregated units, but there are also cases of some of those soldiers actually being integrated into their units over in Europe and during World War II. And it's a very powerful, it's a powerful thing to fight and die for one's country, or put yourself in a situation where you could die for your country and be treated very similar to the soldier next to you in the combat, in the rules of war or whatnot, but then to go back home and be so drastically mistreated. So after World War II, slowly but surely, new legislation was put in place to give African Americans more of a fair shake. And one of the first things that was done was this Morgan versus Virginia ruling in 1946. World War II ended in 1945, so it's pretty close after. And what that stated was that the buses, interstate buses, to segregate those buses was illegal. And a lot of the reason they're interstate is mentioned is because these bus routes would have, I've several times taken a bus hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles because it's very cheap. I would see my wife when she was getting her master's in Michigan and I lived in Iowa. I wouldn't have to spend gas money. My miles would stay low. It would take longer, yes, but I would just like pop in my earbuds and sleep. The interstate buses were not allowed to be segregated because they were long distance buses. But if you were just on a city bus or a bus that was a short route, that was different because the federal government allowed states to kind of monitor and guide themselves with how they wanted to handle equality. So let's see what happened. There were only minor problems during the first few days, but during the second week of the trip, the riders were seriously beaten. One of the buses was burned outside of Alabama. Once inside Alabama, dozens of white people attacked the riders. The United States Justice Department helped the Freedom Riders escape from Birmingham to New Orleans, like as in needing to escape because of fear for one's safety. Kind of like intense, guys. The leaders of CORE did not want to give up, so they sent a new group of volunteers to join the two remaining volunteers, and the trip continued. When they arrived in Montgomery, they were violently attacked by a mob of over 1,000 people. As the riders continued to Mississippi, they suffered further attacks but received more media attention, and additional freedom rides were planned for that summer. In November of 1961, the Interstate Commerce Commission banned segregation in airports and buses and train stations. So you're not going to just change the way the world interacts with these touchy subjects by snapping your fingers, like I said before. You need to have people who are passionate, who are on the same page, and honestly and unfortunately putting themselves and risking themselves for something that they believe in. You would not get the same reaction if it was just a bunch of black people on a bus or just a bunch of white people on a bus. You needed to see the unity between those two groups of people. And you needed to be able to see the perseverance that they showed. They knew what they were doing was not wrong. They knew they had the law on their side, but it was the inability of people to change the way that they think, to change the way that they interact with people who are different than themselves, which made this such a noteworthy thing. This right here, they suffered further attacks, but more media attention. Guys, media is a powerful, powerful machine. All right. The more media attention, the more people get to see what's going on the TV, the more educated they become, the more people see it and think, huh, that doesn't sound right, or that shouldn't be. So when you guys are going to be learning about the civil rights, again, in more depth in high school, you're going to have more examples of these things. Groups of people testing the legitimacy of the law, whether it's going into a diner and performing a sit-in where you should be allowed to be seated here, you should be allowed to be served food, but you wouldn't be because of the color of your skin. There are many examples, freedom rides, sit-ins, and more that show the resolve between groups of people trying to change the society for the better. So I hope you guys have learned something. I hope you guys have taught someone something. Hope you guys have enjoyed this little 4-day little mini series on Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, integration and segregation, and freedom rides, putting yourself right into the fire for change. I miss you guys. Hope you're doing well. As always, let me know if you need anything, and I, excuse me, will see you later. Also, Hawaii game shirt, so strong. See ya.